Margaret stood in the entrance of a large, beautiful mansion. She worked here and remembered much. She was the head servant and the entire home rested on her shoulders. An expensive sports car drove up to the home. It was Victor, the son of the home's owner, who was currently lying in his bedroom, dying. Margaret had raised the children. Their mother was never interested in them. She never wanted them. She had them only for her husband. Seeing that they wouldn't get anything from her, Margaret took on raising them. Early today, she thought. Did he wake? Victor asked, looking at his father's bedroom window. Rough coughing could be heard coming from that area. Yes, please, don't start another fight over the inheritance. Just be with him. He has days left, she said. The bleary and dry old man looked at Victor. Victor sat down next to him. Hey, Dad, it's Victor, your son. Do you recognize me? Of course I do. Do you think I've absolutely lost my mind? Dad, I want to talk to you. While you've been sick, the house and business haven't been looked after. If something happens to you, everything will be ripped into pieces by vultures. Victor's tone was as sweet as possible. So that means you came for the inheritance as the first vulture, he said before coughing. Victor looked at him with the puppy's eyes. He wanted his father to feel that there was no one more reliable than he. And what about your sister? The father asked. Dad, Victoria is a woman. All she needs to do is get married and have kids. She doesn't need the business or the house. She'll get married and her husband will take care of her, Victor said frustratedly. He was terrified that the inheritance would go to her above all. Victoria was a strong, powerful, strict woman, and getting it from her would be difficult. Dad, I swear if you leave it to me, I'll do everything to magnify your business and not leave my sister with nothing. Get out, his father yelled as loud as he could. Margaret looked at Victor and shook her head. She walked him to the exit. Leave him alone and let him die in peace, she said, sighing. Victor grew up angry, hysterical, and volatile. Any hardships in life knocked him off his feet and made him give up. When he passed the gates, he saw a huge Jeep driving towards him. He recognized it as Victoria's car. He blocked her. A rich woman got out. Victoria was smart, goal-oriented, modest, never panicked, and it seemed like she always knew what to do and how to act in any situation. Her manners were magnificent. Victoria guessed that Victor had visited their father, probably asked for the inheritance, and based on his appearance, didn't get it. What do you want, his inheritance? Victor asked angrily. I just came to visit. Not everyone only wants money, brother, Victoria smiled. Victor hated his sister for her self-control, calm, and arrogance. Despite being raised by the same woman, they were completely different and were never friends. Their father never raised them. Their mother abandoned them without any real issue. They were the closest to Margaret. I understand you want everything to look like you. Then your life and your behavior wouldn't be so pathetic, but alas, not everyone is so demanding of others like you, Victoria said without waiting for an answer and got in her car. The guard told Margaret that Victoria was coming. I called the doctor and he said that it looked bad. I'd like to talk to him, Victoria said. Margaret nodded. Just please don't bother him. Your brother already tried, Margaret said. Victoria knocked and went in. Hi, Dad. Yesterday, Victor, and today you? You're pampering me, he said ironically before coughing. Even though Victor had only been there an hour before, Victoria didn't correct him. She simply sat down and held his hand. Who I'd really like to see are my grandkids that I never had a chance to, he said, looking at his daughter. What do you mean? Don't you remember your grandkids, my children? Victoria didn't know why she said this. Was it to satisfy her dying father or to bring him closer to herself? He looked at her carefully. It was clear he was trying to remember, but he couldn't because there weren't any kids. I'm sorry. No matter how hard I try, this disease is taking everything, he said guiltily. Victoria used the situation and asked her father for money to invest in her business. Of course. Take as much as you need. Dad, don't worry. You're just tired. It happens. Listen, I don't have much time left. Bring me my grandkids. I'd like to see them before I died." Victoria nodded, kissed him, and left. Margaret looked at her, not understanding. She really wanted the inheritance to go to Victoria. That way her father's life would continue and the house would be in order. If Victor inherited everything, then he would probably lose it all, down to the last cent, or spend it on girls and entertainment. "What next?" Margaret asked. She sighed. "Bring him grandkids. Don't think I'm doing this out of good intentions. I don't want my father's work to go to waste." She thought about him the whole drive home. Even when he was healthy, he often asked her for grandkids, but she didn't want children. And now she had to find some. Victoria remembered recently seeing a girl and her boy on the way to work. They looked homeless, hung out near a restaurant, and rummaged the dumpsters. She saw the girl the next morning. She parked her car, went up to her, and talked with her. To her surprise, the girl wasn't scared and was willing to talk. Her name was Olivia. She was 8, and her 4-year-old brother was named Danny. He didn't talk. She said their mother took them there and left them because they were in her way. They slept on the street and were able to find food from the restaurant. Victoria's chest felt tight. "Listen, Olivia, I have an offer for you too. If you do something for me, I'll fulfill your greatest wish in return." Olivia looked at Victoria untrustingly. "What do we have to do?" Victoria tried to explain what she wanted. "That's it?" Olivia asked again. "Yes, you just need to act like my kids for my father. Call him Grandpa and call me Mom. And I promise I'll find you a good home, so you won't end up on the street again." They agreed, and she put the kids in her car. She decided she would find them a good orphanage and help them. She took the kids home. It was the first time they had been in a place like this and looked around at everything with wide eyes. She got them cleaned up and bought them clothes, books, and toys. She took them to a doctor. Danny was behind and given medicine, and Victoria hired specialists that would work with him. The kids could have only dreamed of a life like this. Margaret was giving the old man tea, heard a car, and said, "Your daughter's here." Olivia thought the mansion was like a fairy tale castle. Danny walked tightly, holding onto Victoria's hand. She helped them up the stairs and knocked at the door. When she saw the kids, Margaret smiled and said, "Come in. Just don't be too loud. Your grandfather needs rest." "Stop that, Margaret. They're kids. Let them be loud," the old man said, greeting them with a wide smile. Olivia climbed into his bed. She was playing her role well. She told him that she had been in the house before when she was really small, that he didn't play with her because he was busy working. Everything seemed so real that the old man didn't have any doubts that they were his grandkids. "Thank you, dear. I understand that this isn't the best place for children, but you weren't afraid and brought them. I'm so happy." When she looked at him, Victoria wanted to cry. She knew he'd be gone soon, and even though he was barely in her and her brother's lives, she loved him. "I haven't seen him so happy in such a long time. I had forgotten what his smile looked like." "Thank you for bringing them," Margaret said. When he learned about the visit, Victor was furious. He rushed to his father to tell him that Victoria had tricked him. Because of these fake kids, their father could leave her everything, but Victor was too slow. The old man died. Victor didn't go to the funeral. Victoria woke up from a phone call. It was Victor. "So, did you get all the money? You brought him fake kids and stole the inheritance?" Victor yelled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Victoria listened to insults and threats to take her to court to fight everything. But she didn't care. She wasn't thinking of the will or money. She thought about her father who was gone and the kids who had their lives changed over the past few weeks. "Look, we had a hard childhood. Our mother left, our father drank, and then worked so he wouldn't drink. You've got tons of trauma, but it's time to accept that they won't change anything. And it's time to grow up," Victoria said calmly, like always, and hung up. Victoria learned everything about Olivia and Danny's parents from them. She could never take them back to them. Victoria tried to explain this to them as gently as possible and promised to find them a good place where they'd be taken care of. But the problem was she was no longer sure she wanted to give them away. She reminded them she'd fulfill their wish. Olivia suddenly started crying. "Sweetie, what happened? Why are you crying?" Victoria asked. She was quiet for a long time before finally saying all they wanted was to stay with her. Victoria hugged them tight. She was crying too, and said she loved them and wouldn't leave them. The will was read. The only heir was Victoria. Victor was outraged and wouldn't give up. He sued her to dispute the will, accusing his sister of trickery to get the inheritance. Victoria wasn't afraid to lose. She wanted to keep her father's home and work, of course, but that wasn't her life's priority anymore. She understood that at first. It was a trick, but she showed documents in court that she was in the process of adopting the children. Additionally, the will had been written long before the children came. If Victoria had thought before that she needed to share with her brother, she now decided not to. She had always worked a ton, and after her father's death, she took on the business entirely. Victor wanted to improve his position at someone else's expense, without doing anything himself. Victor lost the lawsuit. The kids were already calling Victoria Mom. Today was the day they moved into the castle with their mom. All their things were together. They were met by a happy Margaret at the door. She happily said all the rooms were ready for their new owners. Finally, children were laughing in the home again, like they did once many years ago.